Hey everybody, Mike Stroud. Welcome to the podcast. Excited about having my good friend Danny Dixon here with me. Danny, we were talking earlier. Tell me a little bit about yourself because it's really interesting how you come to Morganton here.
Wow. I tell you, Mike, thank you first of all for allowing me to be a part of all of what you're doing, because I really like what you're doing and it's so positive and it's uplifting for me. But Mike, I'm originally from Fayetteville, Fort Bragg, North Carolina. That's where I grew up at. And, growing up as a kid, Vietnam War was kicking, the Civil Rights Movement was moving, and of course we landed a man on the moon.
Right.
So again, so it was really, really thriving. And Mike, Fayetteville is the midpoint between New York and Miami.
Right.
And so finding that so many people come to Fayetteville, we were always learning and meeting people and just having a real good time by doing that. And
military base too. Right?
Absolutely. Fort Bragg is the world's largest military installation. And so, most everybody was, with the 82nd Airborne.
Yeah, my dad was 82nd Airborne.
That's it. So we share. That's a good story.
Wow.
It'd been great. Like I said, we may have had a jump or two together. How long ago was your dad?
Well, my dad died when he was 49,
no.
triple bypass surgery. He was young. I used to think he was old when I was 22, that kind of thing.
Right.
But I really didn't know that much detail of my dad's story other than I knew he was 82nd Airborne. I know when he jumped out of the plane, the cord wrapped around his neck. I mean, it was, he about died one time. He had scars on his neck from that. But all the training he used to talk about, just all the guys, so many people jumping out in the skies and just walking on people's parachutes. And
you could do that.
It was crazy. He says, that's so. But Fort Bragg and Fayetteville, my mom's from Rayford.
I know exactly where it's at.
And I used to hate going to Rayford as a kid because there was nothing but dirt and pine cones as a kid. But but Fayetteville was close by, so I kind of know that area. But oh man, it's like a sore spot. But I got a lot of family down there. The Wheelers are down there, cousins and stuff like that. And so,
Rayford has really grown.
Man.
Last time you've been there, my daughter lives there now, and it's it's really grown quite a bit. I remember when there was just a little 2-lane roadway here, and now it looks like a major interstate's going through Rayford.
That's crazy. But you were talking about how you were actually coming up here to Morgan, you and your wife?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
My wife, of course, we've been married for 36 years.
Wow.
And I was with the Fayetteville Police Department, and I enjoyed my time with the department. But Mike, I'm glad you're sitting down. I work with a company called Food Line. You ever bought groceries there?
Tommy Smith.
I know Tom very well.
That's way back there.
You said that right. But after I left the police department and finished my college degree, Food Line wanted me to come to work with them in loss prevention. And I become, of course, a regional supervisor with loss prevention.
Right.
And with Food Line gave me an opportunity to work in 14 different states. Mm-hmm. And I had 81 detectives that worked directly for me. Mike, we investigated murder, narcotics, prostitution, larceny, every kind of crime with a corporation. And people like Tom Smith wanted that crime element out of Food Line to be able to service the customers and the employees as well, too.
Exactly.
And so there was a store manager that was murdered in Raleigh. It was really, really sad, and it was an internal type of murder, Mike.
Wow.
And once we got everything solved, I talked to my vice president. I said, I need a couple of days off. He said, well, you deserve them. Go right ahead. So Deb and I jumped in her car, and we stopped here at exit 103 just to get gas.
Right.
Now, Mike, I had a pair of shorts on, a T-shirt, and a hat turned around backwards. You'd have thought, like I said, who is this character, And when I looked at Western Piedmont, I saw a sign that said Sam Irvin Library.
Yeah.
I said, Deb, we studied him as a kid.
Right.
And I wanted to know a little bit more about Sam.
Sure.
And lo and behold, she said, well, I'm not going to walk in there. And I said, well, I will. And I walked into the administration building, and I asked the secretary, I said, do you have a law enforcement training center here? And she goes, well, absolutely, right around the corner. And so I walked into the law enforcement training center, and a young gentleman said, hey, listen, are you a new student? I said, no, sir. I said, I'd apply for a job. I was dressed better. And he said, we have a vacancy. I said, well, you're kidding. And he said, well, do you have a degree? I said, well, yes, I do. And he said, well, I'd like to give you an application. Let's talk about this. And we spoke about it, and I got an application. I got back in the car, and I said, Deb, how would you like to move to Morganton? She goes, no, we don't know anybody from Morganton. All our family's in Fayetteville.
Yeah.
Why don't you bust up the family? We go to, up to Pigeon Forge, Bryson City, rent our cabin, have a good time, come back. And there was on my answer machine, it was this man's name was Tommy Hardy. He was the director back then of the criminal justice system. And he said, are you going to send in your application? And I filled it out and sent it in, and they called me for an interview, and I got hired.
Wow.
So, and who would have thought? And my family said, you've lost your mind, because Mike, the Lord blessed me working with Food Life. The fact of I had made the most money I'd ever made in my life.
Right.
Deb and I were able to live at a beautiful country club.
Right.
On the 14th fairway. Now, I don't play golf, but it was a nice home.
You're right.
And she said, I can't believe you're going to do this. And I said, I'm moving. We're moving together. And so we found an apartment down Highway 64, down a dirt road.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, dirt road. 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom apartment. And it was like the Beverly Hillbillies in reverse. Even my son, Mike, he says, Dad, have you lost your mind? He like that country club living.
Right.
I said, you got to understand, there's more to it than that.
Right.
And once we got settled, I thought this was sort of neat, and we built a cabin up 181, and I have a beautiful view of Table Rock.
Yeah.
And and the good thing about it is, Mike, is I really felt that I was blessed and led here by the Lord for the fact of that I didn't know anything about mortgage.
Right.
I shot a pistol match with the Fayetteville Police Department back in the 81, 82, and we were here just for a brief period of time, and that was it. But I'd never been here other than that.
Right.
And so, who would have thought that I would have left a major corporation, making a lot of money, living at a country club, and then all of a sudden I come here and my salary's cut about a third. But the satisfaction and the reward that I received at working at Western Piedmont, I'm going to tell you, was just awesome. It's hard to explain.
Yeah. Well, man, Danny, that's awesome. I think there's a lot of people in town like that. I'm the same way. A lot of people have come here and they felt like they were supposed to be here, and by happenstance or direction, God's leading, all those different things. It's amazing. I'm glad that you're here. And then, but yet, Danny, you got into you teaching a lot of the police officers and that kind of way. Tell me a little bit about that, because I love police. The police had a very big impact in my life at a young age, because I worked in the safety patrol in the elementary school.
I did too, Mike.
Really?
No kid, yeah.
Awesome, brother.
Hey, that's something, yeah.
We was always protecting people crossing over.
Yeah, wearing little belts across this strap.
We were, lined up and give out everybody's position and, and all those kind of things. So we took a lot of pride in that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
But the police, Sergeant Guyton down in Rock Hill, South Carolina, they always took us to take us to a trip to Atlanta, to the Braves game.
Wow.
And to, it was just amazing. All the history of the Civil War and museums. They took us Chattanooga. It was just amazing. So that's always been part of me. I've always loved the police, and I always loved the respect for that, and the firemen and all our public safety and things like that. To see the way things have turned now, it hurts my heart, because I know God set those things up from the beginning. People don't realize, you read Romans 12 and 13, that God set all these things up, and good's there to protect good,
You would think that, Mike, because again, I want you to consider this. Granted, we both have a strong foundation with the Lord. No ifs and buts about it. Did you know that if you would just take the 10 Commandments, because again, if we go back to the Code of Hammurabi and we start looking at an evolution of how laws developed, and we get back into that and we think about, when God assigned Moses the 10 Commandments, if we would just ascribe to those 10 Commandments, do you know how easy it would be? Because we have in the United States, across the entire United States, we have about 160,000 variations of the 10 Commandments.
Wow.
So again, when you start thinking about, if you think about, for example, like a murder investigation, first degree, second degree, manslaughter, involuntary manslaughter, death by motor, and you can go on and on and on, and you break each one of these crimes and elements down. You think about, look at the variations of the law, and depending on what part of the country you're at, is how they're going to be enforced, So we think about that. You knew my father.
Yeah, I loved your dad.
God, like I said, he thought the world of you. I can tell you that now, and Mike, he was my inspiration to get into the criminal justice system when I got out of the Army.
Well, he was police chief, right?
Mike, he was the youngest police chief in the histories of the department. He was at age 36 years old. It was a 300-man department, and he was the youngest sergeant, youngest lieutenant, youngest captain, and then the youngest chief of police. And people would ask, why are you so dedicated to this? And he said, I'm needing to improve the future for law enforcement officers in our city and in our area. Because, Mike, he started, and this is sort of neat because I have the article, he started the first police canines in all of North Carolina. in 1960, it says, canines may have a future in law enforcement in North Carolina, may have a future.
Right.
And if we look at what's built today, he started the first SWAT teams in North Carolina. They were called tactical units back then because of the civil rights movements.
Right.
But he always believed in fundamental fairness, treating people right,
Right.
and doing the right thing. And so as he started to do that, and Mike, if we were to go down to the police department in Fayetteville, you would see monuments to him. You'd see all these life-size pictures of him, and it shows the evolution of how things were started and how they've evolved today. And it's sort of neat. So as a little boy, I saw that, and he would put me in his cruiser, and he would ride me around, and I would learn things. And we used to laugh about it. At 10 years old, I could investigate a felony murder, but I couldn't change the spark plug in my lawnmower, and I didn't know how to fish. So when some parents would say, "Hey, listen, I'm going to teach my kids, fishing and hunting and cutting grass and this, that, and the other," my father taught me to treat people right. He taught me to turn around and deal with hostile situations in an objective and open-minded manner. And so when I saw this, and I saw the gravitation of all these people heading towards him, I said, I want to be like my dad. I'm going to be like Mike, but I'm going to be like my dad. And so that gave me that opportunity. And so coming here to Morganton, I worked in the 2-year criminal justice program. Now, Mike, that's separate from BLET, what Patrick just went through, a friend of ours. Again, where they train law enforcement officers to get a certification, and it's a 16-week certification. My program was a 2-year college program. And so what I was interested in doing was getting involved, getting as much of the community involved. And I was finding that there was a lot of, say, for example, high school students, 18 years old, they couldn't go to BLET. And so I would talk to them and say, listen, let me work you into the 2-year program. When you finish with me with a 2-year program, I'll get you into the BLET program. And the director, Steve Warren, at that time said, hey, listen, the students that you're sending me after they graduate with you seem to be doing so much better academically. And let's continue to do that. So when he would get the younger ones, he'd send them down to me. Then, of course, once I finished one, I'd send them up to him. And it was just
mentoring.
Absolutely. Because, again, Mike, my whole goal was to help the Morganton Public Safety here, the Sheriff's Department here, SBI agents, Highway Patrol officers, because most all of them in this whole region have been a part of the Western Piedmont program at some point in time. But Mike, we had to take it a step further. I started partnering with 4-year institutions, saying, hey, listen, once my students finish a 2-year program, how can I get them into a 4-year program? So I signed articulation agreements with Lees McRae, Garner-Webb, Western Carolina. And so my students would finish with me, and they could move up as a rising junior. And so this is just even better. Mike couldn't finish there either. So what happens is I had an opportunity to go to Boston University. And what happened was the college president came in to see me, and he said, look, Dan, I need you to complete a graduate program. And it was pretty difficult because there were no real graduate programs around here close by that I could actually go to. And this was to maintain my credentials so that I could continue to teach at the 2-year college. And so I contacted Boston University. I was in their inaugural program, and I graduated towards the top of my class. And so the dean said, hey, listen, are you coming to Boston for graduation? I said, no, just send my degree. And he said, well, I'd really like for you to come. And I said, well, okay, I will. And they flew Deb and I up to Boston, and they flew us up 4 days early. And I happened to be their poster boy, their spokesperson, because, again, there were more students from North Carolina attending Boston University than any other state in the union. So I said, Mike, this makes it even better. So they offered me a job, and I said, I don't want to move to Boston. It's too cold there, Mike.
It really is. I know I cold.
But I love Morganton. I love the people here. I just really do. And I found just a strong bond and association. So they asked, will you teach at Boston University from North Carolina remotely? And I said, I will. So that's where I said, this makes it even better. So I was able to, once my students, if I got them at the high school level, get them into the 2-year program at Western Piedmont, get them into a 4-year university, Lees McRae, Garner-Webb, wherever. And then the ones that really wanted to go, I would get them into the master's program. And if just my signature was just on their application, it met no resistance. And so they could go to Boston. And Boston, Mike, is the 4th largest university in the country, or in the United States. And you know what? They're always jockeying between the first, second, and third best criminal justice graduate program in the nation.
What about that?
And so, so that was just, I wanted to open doors for the students here.
Right.
And so, and I felt like if we could have a good association with the criminal justice element here, if they worked with the Department of Corrections here, because, we have a strong correctional, institutions here. And also I wanted God blessed me. I wanted to be able to share my blessing with them so the kid could get a 2-year, 4-year master's degree and never leave Burke County.
That is awesome, man. People don't realize those kind of opportunities we have. Well, people like you, Dan. That's why I want to do these backstories and get to know people. So what you're saying is that's not going to really help me with my going 25 miles an hour through town at 20 miles an hour and not getting the ticket.
No, sir, I promise it won't. However, that will be a well-read, educated person that writes you a ticket.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right. To be, we obey the law and all things. That they beat me in submission, so or keep your attorney, close on Rolodex, But the law enforcement is so important. People, they're always so quick to turn on people and say, even in my son's generation. I mean, it seems like the generation, everything now is so controversial. It's like, why are you stopping me? They roll down the way. There's no compliance. It's just always resistance. And I got my rights. And why are you asking me? And there's been such a divide in our country. And even with the racial thing, stuff like that, it seems so bizarre to me that we would treat one another this way in any capacity from any source. What's been kind of your what you've seen develop in the last years with stuff like that?
Well, Mike, like I said, again, I worked with the Fayetteville Police Department. I worked narcotics, I worked prostitution, I worked as a road officer academy guy. But I was also a chip. I rode a motorcycle.
Right.
I worked Interstate 95. And the good thing about working as a law enforcement officer, I did not really run into that. If I stopped a person specifically, I had the probable cause. Most all the time, it was yes or no, sir, yes or no, sir. Yes. And you're right. The evolution of that has sort of changed.
Right.
And to complete that, Mike, is I asked my son. I said, do you want to get into law enforcement? And he said, Dad, I'm not you. I'm not Grandpa Chief, and things have changed.
Chief.
And I'm just not willing to do this.
Right.
So he ended up in the Coast Guard. He's a doctor in the Coast Guard.
I got you.
So seeing what's taken place, if I felt very strongly, Mike, if we had a better educated officer, period.
Yeah.
And and let's take the racial diversity out of it. Let's take the male-female equation out of it as well. And let's have a good person, a person that actually could fit the job.
Sure.
Because everybody has that niche in law enforcement.
Right.
We need everyone.
Right.
And so we were finding that more studies have found that the better educated officer you would have a better person to do and perform that job.
Right.
But what's happened is society and, because of cell phones, television shows, especially, they think that law enforcement officers can turn around and shoot the bad guy and everything's all good to go, and they go back to work. It doesn't work that way because one of the first tools that we have has to be common sense. It has to be you use your mind versus, of course, reaching for that weapon.
Sure.
We can't automatically gravitate towards deadly force.
Right.
So the George Floyd incident really turned around and started to shape law enforcement ideals with the communities.
Right.
Mike, there's a fellow by the name of Sir Robert Peel. And of course, in the early 1800s, he's considered to be the father of modern day policing. And he has Peel's principles. And one of Peel's principles, it says, the community are the police and the police are the community.
Yeah.
And we've gotten away from that.
Right.
We've gotten away from that.
Yeah.
And so, we need to be able to bridge those gaps, and where law enforcement agencies need to get out of those police cars and get into the community.
Yeah.
For example, like downtown, why don't we have walking the beat? I started off walking the beat and knowing officers. And then by the same token, you think about the fact of that if going to ball games or you go into a project area and you have these kids that are out, instead of them being fearful of law enforcement, if the officer gets out and spends time with them, explains things to them, career day at school, getting into the officers being able to interact with the community. And I think that if we become more open and start to explain what we're doing, Morganton has a wonderful program, a citizens police academy.
I know, I've been through that,
and that's great. You think about the benefits that you gain from that.
Sure.
How can we turn around and involve more community members and community leaders into these programs?
Right.
And so if they can, they'll help to bridge some of the gaps.
Yeah.
It's all not going to stop. And then by the same token, we start thinking about compensation and salaries, where it's not compensatory enough for law enforcement officers to make the amount of money, because a lot of them are working second and third jobs just trying to make it.
See, now I don't understand that. That's one thing that really bothers me about everything that's going on in our world. Trust me, I struggle every day. Every day is a day of faith, reaching in the bucket and Lord, thank you for this meal and all those things. But at the same time, the Lord's put me in a position now where I see that, we can do some manufacturing here in town. I think about this with waitresses and everything, and it seems like everything is so dated, and there's no innovation in salaries and commissions or whatever the case is. So I'm trying to figure out what's a good. Everybody's got to make money, Danny. In my mind, whoever's sweeping the floor, it's all part of the team.
It has to be.
In that community, like you're talking about, I always feel, safer when I'm somewhere with other people, because I feel like, I'm always, surveying for good and evil.
You have to look for that in today's society, Mike, because again, consider the factor of we're seeing more people going to get carry concealed permits.
Yeah.
And and thinking that, well, hey, look, they're going to put these weapons on, but knowing the fact of you have to go through quite an extensive background check with these. And folks saying, well, let's just get rid of all these automatic weapons and what have you. Well, as long as the United States is the biggest demander of illicit narcotics and illegal weapons on top of that, it's not going to slow down. It just isn't. So what happens you're finding that the citizen themselves are wanting to protect themselves.
Sure.
They're scared. They're worried about that because there's not enough law enforcement officers in the communities to be able to get out there. We were talking about Texas, down in San Antonio, they're down 300 officers. In Baltimore, they're down 600. In Asheville, they're down 100. So how do we fill these vacancies? How do we attract good men and women into these professions? And again, compensation has to be one of them. And it would be great if we would
What is the normal compensation right now?
Well,
I'm sure it varies per town and district and whatever's allowed.
Mike, it does. And that's the sad thing, where we hear that, a law enforcement officer may make $100,000 up in New York, but the cost of living is so much higher.
That don't mean nothing.
Down here, if we see an officer, making 38, 42, 46, a lot of folks may say, well, that's a lot of money, but if you start thinking about
I don't think that's a lot of money. And teachers, that's about what teachers make, ain't it?
Well,
don't that whole profession make about that? To me, right off the bat, it's got to be doubled. I know that's a hard stretch for a lot of people, but I just think at least it's got to be way more than that.
Mike, I think if society would say, hey, listen, we're going to earmark our money.
It's Dollar General stuff. Come on.
Well, we got to get off that.
Yeah,
we've got to get off that. And really,
nothing wrong with Dollar General. Love Dollar General.
I shop there as well too.
But I'm saying, salaries and stuff.
Well, it has to happen. You think about that, Mike, because again, when you pay peanuts, you get monkeys, so to speak. It's the idea of it's sort of scary to think about that, for the fact that and money's not everything. Money can be a short-term motivator, but a person that has an average car payment or a house payment, what does that cost in today's society? I know that at my age, like I said, I'm still teaching at Boston. And again, luckily I'm retired and I'm drawing a state salary and my Social Security, but it's not enough to make it, because I just look at it this way, Mike. I have to work. My wife is 68 years old. She has to work.
Yeah, that bothers me, Dan, because I see that everywhere in our society. And I like working. I think you got to be active and stuff like that. But I see a lot of people like Walmart or something like that, greeters and stuff like that. And I see these elderly people, and that's about the only people you can really depend on to show up for work anymore. Anyways, that generation. But I'm thinking, damn, that lady needs to be off her feet.
Absolutely.
And I go in like CVS and I see your wife, and here she is, running around, like working like at the army at a mess hall, slopping food. I remember with their drugs and just running everywhere, running like crazy. And I know they love serving people, and we trying to serve people and help people, but golly, Danny, that seems a lot.
It is. And going back to that, Mike, Deb, and the bottom line is this: we find that her customer service skills are very, very good, and she feels like I need to serve the public.
I'm saying
because we're that's our society.
That's nature.
Well, you know what? That's probably the best way to put it. And the pharmacist has told me several times that our customer service scores are good because of Deborah.
Right.
You know,
Well, that's like that across the board, Danny, in police or like Deb or, restaurants. I'm always like, is there a hostess? Is somebody with customer service, directing people, helping people? You don't have that anymore.
And that's right. We've got to be more interactive and more balanced.
Yeah.
Reach out. And, and if nothing else, and the people that are down there at the bottom, that person is sweeping that floor or cleaning that toilet, you know what? They're just as important as the college professor.
Oh, yes.
I used to tell the folks that worked at the college that very same way.
Yeah.
People that worked in maintenance and stuff like that. I need you to be able to do your job.
Right.
I'll do mine, and we'll work as a team and build our community together.
That's
I don't look down on them
thing.
because I'll clean the toilet.
Oh man,
I'll
I'm the
cut
first
grass.
one. I'm the first one. To me, that's where it starts: is clean up sidewalks, trash, all that kind of stuff.
Mike, I've seen you in the racquetball court go grab a broom and mop stuff, and you clean those courts yourself. I've seen you do that.
Yeah.
So we're not above turning around and servicing it for other people.
Sure.
And it's not saying, well, throw your chest out and say, well, look at me, I'm doing what I'm doing. It's not that. It's just the way that our nature is to be able to service other people.
Exactly. And that's what public safety is all about. And that's why I'm thinking everything's got to come up. We got to connect. Everybody's got to be involved in the community. And I think we've got that here in Morgan. That's why I like telling the backstories of you. Because see, when people see this and they're like, man, I didn't know that about Danny or his dad. And, I got such great respect for your dad. I loved your dad tremendously. And, I can't wait to put a flagpole up here in honor of his name, and I always wanted to do that where we was at before, but that didn't work out. And I'm glad that we can do something a little bit more concise for him at some point. I want to do that for him because he always meant a lot to me in his service and not knowing things about him. That's why I'm so glad you're here to tell about him and then tell your story, Danny, because you're so vital to the community. And to have your dad would be so proud to know the legacy that you're carrying on. Oh.
And that's all I wanted, Mike. I know it's all I wanted because you know what? The funny thing about it was, I was here 1 year.
Yeah.
And he said, "You're not coming back to Fayetteville, are you?" I went, "No, sir, I'm not." He said, "I'm coming up there." I said, "Come on."
I know.
And you know what, Mike? That man, you know what he did? And I listened to what he said. I seen how he built the Fayetteville Police Department.
Right.
And I said, you know what? I'm not going to reinvent the wheel. I'm going to learn from this character.
That's right.
And so I would come in and I said, "Dad, what should I do about this? What should I do about that?" And he goes, "Do this, that, and the other." He always would take his finger to point his finger, like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
He said, "Boy, do this, and this." I said, "Yes, sir." And every time I did, it worked.
Yeah.
It worked.
Yeah.
And so when I would have him to come in to speak to the students,
right.
and they'd go like, "That's not your dad,"
Yeah.
And I said, "Yeah, it is." And I said, "Will you please tell them what's going on?" Because here, there was a strong mafia presence in Fayetteville.
Right.
And they really worried about him. And there were several contracts to kill him out. Front of our home was cut down.
Wow.
But Mike, you know what the unique thing about this was my father's funeral.
Yeah.
It was my father's funeral. And I'll tell you why. Granted, of course, he was here and he passed away, and I miss him terribly. It's still me.
Sure.
And lo and behold, he was going to be interned in Fayetteville.
Yeah.
And so we get to Fayetteville, we get the big St. Patrick's Catholic Church, and it's all full and stuff like that. Well, Sossamans are the people that took care of his arrangements, and they did an excellent job. Yeah. Well, while we're in the church, one of the fellows said, "Hey, look, who are those folks over there?" I said, "It's the mafia." He goes, they look scary. I said, "That's the real mafia, son. That's not TV Hollywood kind of stuff." He goes, "Who was that over there?" I said, "That's a few of my friends with the CIA." Like, "Who do what?" Those are state troopers. There's a Hollywood patrolman. They start pointing out all these folks and everything like that. Like, holy smokes! So when I asked him, I said, "Do you want to meet the mafia?" He goes, "No." Well, do you want to meet my CIA friends? He's like, "No." And Mike, there were 40 police cars in his procession to take him from the church to where he was going to be buried at. Yeah. And so when we get there, of course, and the mafia comes over, and they said, "Hey, look, we didn't like your father's ways, neither like our ways, but we respect." Like kind of stuff, like the Italian kind of stuff. And I said, "Thank you for being here. What do you need?" I said, "I don't need nothing." So I got a little worried myself.
CIA's over looking, what's he doing?
So they leave the city, but they go like, "Hey, we're here to make sure your dad is taken care of." Yeah. And I'm like, man, that's all squared away. So I was glad to see those guys.
Right.
Some people from Special Forces, the 82nd, the Delta team, they were there. And all these folks were there.
That's awesome.
And it was just sort of neat to see that. And and Mike, when and just before that, we saw the news flash on the Raleigh TV station said, Police Chief Danny Dixon passed away. So he was even remembered,
Yeah.
in a positive light.
Oh man, that's
And just sort of, it was unreal. So, but listen to what he went through.
Yeah.
Because, and Mike and I don't know if I've ever told you this or not, but when he became police chief, he told the city manager, he said, I want you to open up my personnel file. He goes, I can't do that. He says, I want you to open up my personnel file. He said, I can't. I want any police officer or any citizen in the city of Fayetteville to look at my record.
yeah.
And he said, we can't do that, Chief. He said, well, I'm asking you. Because, I went through the civil rights movements. I went through all these type of, with Vietnam and Jane Fonda and all this kind of stuff. Matter of fact, he arrested Jane Fonda.
Wow.
And, and that was back there, the demonstration times.
Yeah.
Well, the bottom line was this. They said, well, we can't do that. And he said, I just want the citizens to know that, again, that you treat all people fair.
Right.
And you'll see I don't have any police brutality
Right.
and negative things written about me whatsoever in any of my, of course, my work dealings with the city of Fayetteville. But I guarantee he arrested quite a bit of folks. He got his shares of knockdown dragouts, and it's sort of neat, Mike, because again, folks will say, "Well, like, you miss your dad." I said, "Yeah, I do." I said, "My dad and I, we jumped out of airplanes together.
Right.
We drank spirituous alcohol together occasionally, but we got in bar fights together." Folks are like, "Bar fights?" Like, yeah. We were both cops.
Yeah, right. You don't do that.
They have this real funny look on their face, and it's sort of neat to be able to do that. But it's like I said, it always went back to fundamental fairness.
Yeah.
It wasn't this George Floyd, let me put my foot on your neck.
Right.
Mike, him, and I both were self-defense instructors for the police department.
Right.
We never, ever, ever taught anything like that because that'll kill a person.
Right.
And so when we start seeing that maybe some of these officers are ill-trained,
Ill-trained.
or the wrong person is in a position of trust and authority, we've got to weed them out.
Yeah.
We have to weed them out quickly. Because if not, they do more to hurt us.
You're right. Yeah.
And again, that just can't happen.
Yeah.
That just can't happen. And it has, Mike.
Yeah.
It's scarred the profession itself.
Yeah.
So that's why it's important that we get out into communities.
Yeah.
We start talking to young folks specifically, get them interested in the criminal justice profession, whether it's police, courts, corrections, loss prevention.
Right.
Again, getting good folks involved to protect our assets and protect lives and be able to trust people. That's so important.
Yeah.
We have to have trust and faith in our system. And you're right. Our police department here, our sheriff's department here, our highway patrol here, our people who work Department of Corrections here, they're good folks. I'll tell you that, Mike. I'm going to tell you they're good folks.
I agree 100%.
So you couldn't ask for better folks.
Amen.
I see them every day, and I'm very fortunate to be able to turn around and had a hand in some of their educational standards.
Good deal. Stay with us for more. All right, we're here with Danny Dixon, and Danny, we're talking about police, and let's talk about police and faith and God and the Bible, and my story's kind of unique on that because I got involved with the National Guard. When I was in high school. I joined. My parents had to sign because I was just always that kind of person. I like to be organized and together and structured and those kind of things. And my brother was a Marine. My dad, was in the Army. But that being said, I joined the National Guard, made 3 drills. But it was the craziest thing, or 6 drills before I made my actual basic training. In the middle of 12th grade, I went through a dramatic experience with the Lord, where I was, came out of doing everything I was doing in high school, drugs and alcohol and all those things, and really had a turn in faith with my Lord, and he really changed my life. And I went from being gung-ho I didn't feel like I needed to be in the National Guard. So this has always been something that's been part of my story because, I remember the recruiter coming up and said, Mike, somebody comes in your house and pointing a gun at what you got. And I didn't really know how to respond at the time. My dad, went with me and I did get out, but I've always been so patriotic from the very beginning and everything, still very patriotic. That was one of the decisions I look back on, and I didn't understand my faith and the understanding of how God works and law and good and bad. I didn't know people don't know how to separate that sometimes. Jesus laid down his life. Now you don't have to lay down your life. But Jesus laid his down for us. But that being said, there's still wars, rumors of wars. You still overcome evil with good. But at the same time, there's common sense here. If I had it do over again, man, I'd have went in and served it with faith and everything else. But I felt like it was a controversy at the time, but it really wasn't, till I grew and matured more in my walk. What say you on stuff like this?
You know, Mike, I'd like to begin with saying I was working the interstate and I was training a rookie police officer, and I was in a car this time. And I look out in the distance and I see the smoke. And so I switched off to channel 1 or channel 3 and said, you know, do you have any reports of any accident or anything like that? No. And so in working the interstate, you know, I had a regular radio, police radio, and I had a scanner, you know,
Right.
listen to CB truckers and stuff like that. And of course, we heard nothing. And so I told the partner, I said, look, let's go check this out. He goes, yeah, let's go. And so I traveled down the road and I look off to the distance, and Mike, I don't know now, your age, I'm gonna tell my age for sure. I don't know if you remember little Chevrolet Chevettes.
Okay, yeah.
Well, again, what had happened was that there was a Chevrolet Chevette and it was traveling in the southbound lane at exit 49. And what had happened was this lady fell asleep at the wheel and she drifted off the road. When she drifted off the road, she hit a huge oak tree. And of course, it buckled around and smoke was coming from the engine.
Wow.
I found out later, of course, her husband was driving a Ryder truck right behind him. They were moving from Massachusetts and they had just both retired. They're moving to Florida. But he said he watched his wife drift off the roadway and hit that tree. And he went by her and he, of course, he stopped. And so when I seen what was going on, I said, John, get the fire extinguisher, and he gets the fire extinguisher. And I go over and I try to pull the door open and I can't get it open. And so I'm going like, please, God, help me. So I was able to finally get the door open. Well, the lady was a pretty large lady. She was lethargic. She was a big girl. And what had happened, the steering wheel had impacted her chest. And so I was trying to get her out, and I kept watching the smoke at the same time, and I started getting a little scared myself.
Right.
And so lo and behold, I kept pulling. So finally, I got her out and I got her away, and I got her maybe 15, 18 feet away, and I laid her down. But when I laid her down, that car went boom, and caught fire. I mean, it really was burning like you can't imagine. So I knew I was no way to give her chest compressions because she was impaled. She was crushed. And EMS comes pulling up. And they said, of course, the lady's deceased. And I'm going, yeah, what do we do? And so we respectfully got her to EMS, and she left. Well, fire trucks come. They finally get ready to put the fire out. But this Chevette, Mike, burnt to the ground.
Right.
There's nothing. I mean, it's not, it was full of boxes and furniture, luggage and stuff like that. It burned. Mike, I can't overemphasize the fact that there's nothing in this car.
You're right.
But something told me, said, I need to just look anyhow, because, law enforcement officers were responsible for logging things like that when you have the vehicles that are involved in accidents. But the hatchback was open just a little bit. And so I went ahead and I opened the rest of it up. And I took my flashlight and I started just sifting through some of the stuff. And as I started sifting through, I found a Bible.
Wow.
A Bible. I picked this Bible up and it was burned around the end. Mike, the car burnt to the ground, but that Bible didn't burn.
Wow.
I take the Bible, I put it in my police car. And of course, I get the man, her husband, I put him in my car. And I take him to a Holiday Inn in Fayetteville. And John drives his Ryder truck and parks it, of course. And I asked him, I said, sir, what denomination are you? He said, I'm Catholic. And I said, okay, fine. I said, this is your Bible. He goes, yeah. I said, it didn't burn. He started crying. Right around the corner of St. Patrick's Church. Mm-hmm. And again, I go and knock on the door, get the priest. And I said, listen, I told him what happened. I said, will you come with me to talk to this man? He goes, absolutely. And I told him what happened. I said, Father, this Bible, it didn't burn. Yeah. He said, son, you just witnessed a miracle from Christ, because God's word doesn't burn. And so what it did was, my faith was strong, but it really impacted me. And I never in my life ever forgot that.
Wow.
So it hit me hard. But Mike, it takes a second role. Remember I told you I rode a motorcycle for the city of Fayetteville, and I loved every minute of it, because again, I like motorcycles. It's a lot of fun, and it's sort of getting paid to ride. We led parades and funerals and the kids with like this,
jump the ditches.
Yeah, I'm telling you, a few times, jumping all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
But one evening I was involved in a serious accident in January, and I had a car that we were both stopped, and we both make a left-hand turn, and this Camaro had really punched it, was getting down the road, and it was a 45-mile-an-hour zone, and he'd run up to about 70. So, so I cut my blue light on, and the blue light's running, and of course he doesn't stop, he just continues to get it, and I continue to get it. So we run up to about 90.
Oh, man.
Now we're in a 45-mile-an-hour zone.
Wow.
They're really not designed for that kind of speed.
No.
So So I take my bike and I wheel out and I pull beside him. I said, pull over. And I looked at him. He looked at me. And when I looked back, again, there's a car right in front of me.
Oh, my goodness.
And it's not too far from here to the wall. They teach you in chip school to turn around. If you think you're going to wreck, is to pop the handlebars and lay back and the bike and slide off of it because you're wearing riding leathers.
Right.
I was too close. So I just pushed the bike away. Pushed the bike away. It catapulted me over 400 feet down the road. Lady at the accident said, she goes, it looked like Superman was coming flying, across the interstate or across the roadway. And lo and behold, the same church, St. Patrick's Church, there's a statue of the Blessed Mother.
Yeah.
And that's where I ended up at.
Right there.
I broke my legs, I crushed my shoulder, side of my face, and again, I asked my buddy, I said, hey, look, I said, how about help me get up from here? He goes, Hoss, you're not getting up. But lo and behold, I prayed, I cried, I did everything you could just imagine.
Yeah.
Mike was 23 years old.
Wow. 23.
Would you like someone to say, you're not going to walk again? But I prayed real hard. But when I ended up, and I knew that I ended up in front of the Blessed Mother,
wow.
That was just really affirmed my faith.
Yeah.
So you think about that, and Fayetteville's a rough town.
Yeah.
I've been stabbed, I've been shot at, I've been blown through the air. And the good thing about it, and I'm still here, so I'm hoping that God has a sense of humor. You know what I'm saying? And Mike, I'm just a very fortunate man. Yeah. My training, I relied on my training from the military and from the police department. Yeah. Fayetteville was so well educated and so well trained. Yeah. We expected those kind of things to take place. That's why I call it Vietnam.
Right.
But my walk with the Lord every day, I prayed every day. I either got on that bike or on a cruiser, or if I was in an undercover car, I prayed every day. And then when I got home, I said, look, thank you. That's it. We can't forget, Mike. We can't forget. Yeah. No matter what position you're in.
That's right.
And so again, and I tried to reaffirm that with my children, right, and the rest of my family. And we've, you ever watch Blue Bloods on TV?
Oh yeah.
We used to, as a family, we would do that. Yeah. And we talking about stories.
Sense to y'all, didn't it?
It did for us. So we're fortunate to be able to share those stories.
Sure.
And Mike, I just look at it this way. The last speech my dad gave was in June. And I was at the Fayetteville Police Department, and he was asked to talk at the Fallen Officers Memorial.
Right.
And he did give a wonderful speech, and of course, and he read a wonderful prayer. And we got ready to leave, and there's a beautiful monument to the fallen officers.
Right.
And so I said, Dad, hang on. I goes, you see the monument? He goes, yeah. I said, what's missing? He said, well, son, I don't know. He said, it's a beautiful monument. I said, yes, sir, it is, isn't it? I said, well, what's missing, Dad? He goes, I don't know, son. What are you trying to get at? I said, your name and my name's not on there. God has been good to us. We're fortunate. Yeah. We're fortunate.
Oh, man. I don't even know where to end, Danny. That's so powerful. Man, we love our police officers. We love everybody. Love these stories, Danny. This just encourages me because I like to know people but more. And I think people out there in our community want to know each other more. So stay tuned for more stories like this.